The funeral parlor smelled like lilies and lies. I stood in the back row of my Uncle Richard's memorial service, watching my family perform grief like they'd rehearsed it. Perfect posture. Appropriate tears. My cousin Sarah dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, the same cousin who hadn't spoken to Uncle Richard in 5 years. But that's how we do things in the Morrison family. We maintain the image. We protect the reputation. We bury the truth 6 feet under and plant flowers on top. Your grandfather would have been so proud of how we've all come together, my aunt whispered to me, squeezing my hand with her cold fingers. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. Maybe both. Because 3 weeks earlier, I'd found something that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. About my grandfather. About the carefully constructed mythology we'd all been living inside like prisoners who'd forgotten we were in a cage. My grandfather, Thomas Morrison, died when I was 19. That was 11 years ago. He was a small-town journalist in Cedar Falls, Pennsylvania, the kind of man who knew everyone's name and everyone's story. He ran the local paper for 43 years. When he died, they named a park bench after him. They called him a pillar of the community. They also called his entire archive of work tragically lost, in a basement flood at the newspaper office 6 months after his death. Every document, every photograph, every recording, every investigation he'd ever worked on gone. Water damage, they said. Irreversible, they said. The building had old pipes, they said. Just terrible timing, they said. I was the only one who called it convenient. You need to let this go, Emma, my mother told me at Thanksgiving last year, her voice sharp enough to cut turkey. Your grandfather's legacy is intact. Why do you always have to dig up the past? Because someone buried it, I said. She didn't speak to me for 3 months after that. But I couldn't let it go. Maybe it was the journalist in me. I'd followed in my grandfather's footsteps, though I covered tech startups for a Boston magazine instead of corruption in small-town Pennsylvania. Or maybe it was something deeper. A memory I couldn't shake. My grandfather 2 weeks before he died, gripping my hand in his hospital room. They think I don't know, he'd whispered, his voice scratchy from the oxygen tube. They think I'm too sick to notice. But I made copies, Emma. I made copies of everything. At the time I thought it was the morphine talking. Paranoid delusions of a dying man. I was wrong. The call came from a lawyer I'd never heard of, Marcus Chen, executor of a storage unit estate sale in Philadelphia. Unit 247 had been rented under a false name but paid for by a trust fund that traced back to my grandfather. The rent had been automatically withdrawn for 11 years. The trust had finally run dry. The unit is scheduled for auction next week, Marcus said over the phone. But there's a note here that says if a Thomas Morrison or Emma Morrison ever inquires, we're to contact them first. Are you Emma Morrison? My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The storage facility was in a forgettable industrial park 40 minutes outside the city. Marcus met me there with a bolt cutter and a clipboard. Unit 247 was tucked in the back corner, away from the main corridor. The kind of place you'd rent if you wanted something hidden but not lost. The lock broke with a metallic snap that echoed through the concrete hallway. Inside was my grandfather's life's work. 17 banker's boxes, each labeled in his precise handwriting. Dates ranging from 1968 to 2014. File folders bursting with documents. Cassette tapes rubber-banded together in bundles. External hard drives sealed in plastic bags with desiccant packets. And on top of the first box, a letter addressed to me. If you're reading this, it means they finally succeeded in burying the truth. Or they think they did. I'm sorry to put this weight on your shoulders. I'm sorry you inherited a war instead of just memories. But you inherited my stubbornness too. I know you won't let this stay buried. In these boxes is everything they tried to erase. The investigation they shut down. The people they silenced. The corruption that ran so deep it poisoned an entire town. I couldn't publish it while I was alive. Too many threats. Too much pressure. They threatened your grandmother. They threatened your mother. They made it very clear what would happen if I didn't retire gracefully. So I retired. But I didn't surrender. The truth is in here. All of it. What you do with it is up to you. Just remember, they will try to stop you. They will say you're dishonoring my memory. They will say you're tearing the family apart. They will be right about one of those things. But some things matter more than family dinner table peace. Love always, Grandpa Tom. I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit and cried for 20 minutes. Then I opened the first box. The files documented a decade-long investigation into the Cedar Falls municipal corruption case, a conspiracy involving the town council, the police chief, the county judge, and 3 prominent local business owners, including my uncle's father-in-law, Robert Thorne. They'd been systematically diverting federal grant money meant for infrastructure improvements, funneling it through shell companies, and pocketing millions. My grandfather had proof. Recorded phone conversations, bank statements, emails, testimony from a construction worker who'd blown the whistle and then mysteriously left town, photographs of documents that should have been sealed. But what made my blood run cold was the final folder in box number 4. It was labeled, Threats and Intimidation, Morrison Family. Inside were letters. Anonymous at first, then increasingly bold. Warnings that accidents happen. That house fires start easily. That people asking too many questions sometimes don't wake up. And then, in my mother's handwriting, a letter to my grandfather dated 3 weeks before his death. I'm begging you. Please stop. Please just let this go. They know about Emma's college applications. They know her schedule. They've made it clear that if you publish any of this, she'll pay the price. I know you think you're fighting for justice. But I'm fighting for my daughter's life. Please, Dad. Choose us over the truth. Just this once. My mother had known. She'd known everything. And she'd chosen silence. I brought 1 box home that first day. The box with the core evidence. I spent 3 nights going through every page, every recording, every photograph. Cross-referencing dates. Verifying sources. Building the story the way my grandfather had taught me. It was airtight, unimpeachable, devastating. Robert Thorne and his associates had stolen $4.3 million from Cedar Falls between 2004 and 2013. Money that was supposed to fix bridges, repair schools, and upgrade the water treatment plant. Meanwhile, the elementary school had a leaking roof for 6 years. The town's main bridge was declared structurally unsound and remained unfixed for 8 years until a federal emergency grant came through. The water supply had elevated lead levels that went unreported. People had suffered while powerful men got rich. And my family had helped cover it up. Called my mother. I found Grandpa's files, I said without preamble. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Emma. Her voice was barely a whisper. Where? Storage unit. He left me a letter. He left me everything. You need to destroy it. I need to what? Destroy it. Burn it. Whatever you found, Emma, you need to make it disappear. You don't understand what you're dealing with. I understand that Grandpa spent 10 years documenting a massive fraud scheme and you helped silence him. I protected you. Her voice cracked. They threatened to kill you. They were watching you, Emma. Do you understand? They knew where you lived, where you went to school, what time you walked home. Your grandfather was willing to sacrifice you for a story. For justice. For his ego, she shouted. For his goddamn pride. And I was supposed to just let him paint a target on your back. He was right, Mom. Everything in these files, it's all true. They stole millions. People suffered. And that's terrible. But you're my daughter. You come first. You've always come first. What about their daughters? I asked quietly. What about the kids who got sick from the water? What about the families who lost everything when the bridges stayed broken and businesses couldn't get supplies through? That's not our problem. It's exactly our problem. We're the ones who could have stopped it. She hung up. Within 6 hours, I got a call from my editor at the magazine. Someone had filed a complaint about my recent work. There were concerns about my journalistic ethics. Maybe I should take some time off. Paid leave. Just until things settled down. I knew a warning when I heard one. The next day my landlord called. There had been complaints about noise. Also, they were planning to renovate. I'd need to move out by the end of the month. Very sorry. Here's your deposit back. And then Uncle Richard called. The same uncle we'd just buried. No, wait. That's not right. That happened before. Before the funeral. God, it's hard to keep the timeline straight when you're living through psychological warfare. Uncle Richard called me 2 days after I'd talked to my mother. Emma, honey, I heard you found some of your grandfather's old things. That must have been so emotional for you. His voice was warm, concerned. Exactly the way a predator sounds when it's circling. It was, I said carefully. I wonder if maybe you'd let me take a look at what you found. For the family archives, you know. We'd love to preserve Tom's legacy properly. I'm sure you would. Emma. The warmth drained from his voice. You're playing with fire. These are serious people. They've already started applying pressure, haven't they? Your job. Your apartment. It's only going to get worse. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to protect you. Just like your mother tried to protect you. Just like your grandfather should have protected all of us instead of chasing ghosts. They weren't ghosts, Uncle Richard. They were criminals. And you knew. You all knew. What I know, he said slowly, is that you have a promising career and a whole life ahead of you. What I know is that martyrdom is a choice. Your grandfather made that choice, and it killed him. Are you really going to make the same mistake? Hung up. He died of a heart attack 3 days later. Natural causes, the doctors said. Stress and a lifetime of poor diet. 63 years old. Tragic but not surprising. I went to his funeral and watched my family mourn and wondered which of them had made the call. The opportunity came from an unexpected place. Pennsylvania Today, a regional PBS show that covered state history and culture, was doing a segment on small-town journalism in the digital age. They wanted to feature Cedar Falls and my grandfather's legacy as the longtime editor of the local paper. The producer, a woman named Linda Vasquez, called me personally. We'd love to have you on the show, she said. As Tom Morrison's granddaughter and a journalist yourself, you'd be the perfect person to talk about his impact on the community. It was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Except I hadn't been waiting. I'd been backed into a corner with nowhere left to go. My mother had stopped talking to me entirely. My cousin Sarah had sent me a long text about family loyalty and betrayal that ended with, "I hope you can live with yourself." I'd been effectively blacklisted from every publication I'd ever freelanced for. My savings were running out. And I had 17 boxes of evidence sitting in my apartment that no one wanted to hear about. So I said yes to Linda Vasquez. The show was filmed live at a studio in Harrisburg. Small audience, maybe 50 people. Broadcast across Pennsylvania on a Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. Not exactly prime time, but enough. I brought 3 folders with me. The core evidence. Enough to tell the story. Enough to make it matter. Linda was warm and professional during the pre-interview. We'd talk about Grandpa's career, his commitment to local journalism, his impact on Cedar Falls. A feel-good piece about a beloved community figure. I nodded along and felt my heart hammering against my ribs. My mother had somehow found out I was doing the interview. She'd left me 7 voicemails. I hadn't listened to any of them. I'd also gotten a message from a lawyer representing interested parties, advising me that spreading unverified allegations could result in legal action. I deleted it. The stage lights were blinding. Linda sat across from me in a comfortable armchair. The audience was a blur of faces beyond the lights. Could barely breathe. "We're live in 30 seconds, someone called. I gripped the folders in my lap. "Emma Morrison is with us tonight," Linda said to the camera, her voice smooth and practiced. Emma's grandfather, Thomas Morrison, was the longtime editor of the Cedar Falls Chronicle and a pillar of journalism in our community. "Emma, thank you for being here." "Thank you for having me," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Your grandfather had an incredible career. 43 years telling the stories of Cedar Falls. What do you think his legacy means to journalism in Pennsylvania? This was my moment. Stay on script and play it safe or burn it all down. I thought about my grandfather's letter. Some things matter more than family dinner table peace. His legacy, I said slowly, is complicated. Because my grandfather spent the last decade of his career investigating the biggest corruption scandal Cedar Falls has ever seen. And he was silenced before he could publish it. Linda's expression froze. I'm sorry, what? Everything you've heard about his work being lost in a flood, that's not true. I found his files 3 weeks ago. He'd hidden them in a storage unit. I opened the first folder. For 10 years, my grandfather documented systematic fraud by Cedar Falls municipal leadership. They stole over $4 million in federal grant money. He had proof. Bank statements, recordings, testimony. Emma, I'm not sure this is. Linda started. Robert Thorne, former county supervisor. Marcus Webb, Cedar Falls police chief. Judge Patricia Holbrook. I held up a bank statement. All of them involved. All of them enriching themselves while schools crumbled and water quality deteriorated and bridges failed safety inspections. The studio had gone completely silent. My grandfather tried to publish this investigation. And he was threatened. His family was threatened. I was threatened. I was 17 years old and they threatened to kill me if he didn't bury the story. I opened the second folder. So he buried it. He retired. He protected us. But he also made copies. He documented everything. And in his final letter to me, he wrote this. My voice cracked. I had to stop and breathe. He wrote, if you're reading this, it means they finally succeeded in burying the truth, or they think they did. The truth is in here. All of it. What you do with it is up to you. I looked directly into the camera. My family begged me not to do this. They said I was destroying his legacy. They said I was tearing us apart. And they're right about that second part. But Grandpa's real legacy isn't the park bench with his name on it. It's not the nice things people said at community gatherings. I held up the third folder. His legacy is this. The truth he wouldn't let stay buried. The investigation that cost him everything. The choice he made to document evil even when he couldn't stop it himself. Emma, Linda tried again. These files are now public record. I'm donating all 17 boxes to the Pennsylvania State Archives. Anyone who wants to verify what I'm saying can request access. The evidence is all there. The recordings, the documents, the testimony. My hands were shaking. I felt like I might throw up or pass out or both. My grandfather wrote one more thing in his letter. He said, some things matter more than family dinner table peace. I looked at Linda, at the camera, at the blurred faces in the audience. Truth matters more. Justice matters more. The people who suffered while powerful men stole from them, they matter more. The silence in the studio was deafening. And then, from somewhere in the audience, someone started clapping. The video went viral within hours. Not the broadcast itself. That reached maybe 100,000 Pennsylvania households. But someone in the audience recorded it on their phone and posted it to Twitter. Then YouTube. Then TikTok. By the next morning it had 7 million views. The Pennsylvania Attorney General's office opened an investigation within 48 hours. Federal prosecutors followed 3 days later. The files I'd donated to the state archives were subpoenaed as evidence. Everything my grandfather had documented, everything he'd protected and hidden and died knowing might never see the light, became the foundation of the largest municipal corruption case in Pennsylvania history. Robert Thorne was indicted on 17 counts of fraud and conspiracy. Marcus Webb pleaded guilty and turned state's witness. Judge Holbrook retired abruptly and moved to Florida. 6 other individuals were charged. 3 more cooperated with investigators. Cedar Falls got its money back. Most of it anyway. The bridge was fixed. The school got a new roof. The water system was completely overhauled. And my family stopped speaking to me entirely. Not just my mother. Everyone. Cousins I'd grown up with. Aunts and uncles who'd sent me birthday cards my whole life. My grandmother, who was still alive at 92, left me out of her will and told my mother I was dead to her. The Morrison family gatherings continued without me. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, I saw the photos on Facebook. Everyone smiling. Everyone together. Everyone pretending I'd never existed. It hurt more than I expected. More than I'd prepared for. But I also got letters. Hundreds of them from people I'd never met. A woman whose son's asthma was triggered by the contaminated water. A construction worker who'd been blacklisted for asking questions. A teacher who'd watched her school deteriorate for years while the district claimed there was no money for repairs. Thank you, they wrote. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for telling the truth. One letter came from a man named Daniel Garcia. He'd been the construction worker my grandfather had interviewed. The whistleblower who'd fled town in the middle of the night after receiving death threats. Your grandfather saved my life, he wrote. He told me to run, and he promised me he wouldn't let it be for nothing. I've spent 15 years wondering if anyone would ever know the truth. Thank you for making sure they do. I framed that letter. 6 months after the broadcast, I visited my grandfather's grave. The park bench with his name on it had been removed. Town council voted unanimously. Controversial figure, they said. No longer appropriate as a civic honor. But someone had left flowers on his headstone. Fresh ones. And a note that said, "True journalist. True hero. Thank you." I sat in the grass next to his grave and told him everything. About the storage unit. About the files. About the family that chose silence and the strangers who chose gratitude. About being alone and being right and how those things sometimes go together. I think you knew it would cost me everything, I said to the stone. I think you knew and you left it to me anyway. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees. I hope it was worth it, I whispered. And then louder because I wanted him to hear it wherever he was. It was worth it. I still work as a journalist. Freelance now because no one wants to hire the woman who blew up her own family on live television. But I get enough work. I tell stories that matter. I ask the questions other people won't ask. And sometimes late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment going through documents or chasing leads or wondering if I made the right choice, I think about my grandfather's letter. Some things matter more than family dinner table peace. He was right. The truth mattered more. Justice mattered more. The people who suffered mattered more. And somewhere in all those boxes he left me, tucked between bank statements and recorded threats and evidence of powerful men doing terrible things, was one more document. A quote he'd handwritten and dated 3 days before he died. The price of truth is paid in loneliness. But silence costs everyone else. Keep it on my desk now. Right next to Daniel Garcia's letter. Right next to a photo of my grandfather at his newspaper desk, young and determined and ready to fight. For the first time in my life, I don't whisper his name like a secret or a shame. I speak it out loud. Thomas Morrison. My grandfather. The man who taught me that some truths are worth inheriting, even when they come with a war attached.